The following is a special segment of Solutions Not Excuses, presented without commercial breaks, courtesy of Dr. Michael Hurd.
The following program is brought to you by the Living Resources Center. Welcome to Solutions Not Excuses with Dr. Michael Hurd. Dr. Hurd, a psychotherapist and author, will give you answers and insight into good mental health, politics, philosophy, and current events. Now, let's join our program and Dr. Hurd.
Welcome to a very special edition of Solutions Not Excuses and Dr. Hurd's radio show. My name is Bob Yesbeck, and I work with Living Resources Press. We are the publisher of Dr. Hurd's latest book, Grow Up America, and presently the publisher of his first book, Effective Therapy. I also have the pleasure of producing his radio show, and so I've worked closely with Dr. Hurd in these various endeavors, and Dr. Hurd contacted me this evening on September 11th and said that he had to talk to the people that come to his site. And so we're doing a special show tonight to talk to Dr. Hurd specifically about the events, the political ramifications, the personal ramifications, the psychological ramifications of what happened today in New York and what happened today in Washington, D.C. We've all seen the pictures. The New York skyline will never be the same. It's a beautiful city, and all of a sudden it's been taken back many, many, many years in its skyline. And we're thinking that America won't be the same. And Dr. Hurd feels America will never be the same. If you are listening to this, then you also have access to today's Daily Dose of Reason. And you should read that. You should download it. You should print it. You should give it to your friends. We give you permission to do that. Just make sure Dr. Hurd's name is on it. And let people read it, because America grew up today. Dr. Hurd's book, Grow Up America, I don't think he was thinking of this when he wrote that title, but it happened nonetheless. Dr. Hurd, I'm welcoming you to your own show.
Thank you, Bob. And no, this was most certainly not the kind of thing I had in mind when I wrote Untitled, Grow Up America. Actually, I wrote that book about living the happy and responsible life, and I really did talk, though, in the book as well about the need for people to have self-esteem, and I know self-esteem is a cliche, but really one of the reasons that this tragedy happened today is that in this country, we do not, as a culture, have self-esteem. We don't know what we're about. We don't know why we're great or why we could be great. We were once greater than we are now.
When you say self-esteem, specifically, what do you mean? What accomplishments should we have self-esteem about?
Well, self-esteem is basically the sense that you are able, that you're capable to achieve things in life, but also the sense that you're worthwhile. And we have a lot of the first. We have a lot of capable people in this country that are really pursuing their goals and their dreams, and they're actualizing their talents. But what there's a tremendous lack of in this country is a sense that I deserve this. I deserve, if I work hard, I deserve the good things that come from it. And people in this country have worked so hard, and this is still true even today with all the problems, to create tremendous things. And what better concrete form than the World Trade Center? I mean, these terrorists, these evil, monstrous terrorists, whoever they were or are, who orchestrated this whole thing, they knew what they were doing. They knew exactly what the good is, and they understand that it was epitomized in the World Trade Center, which is properly the symbol of capitalism across the world, capitalism and individual rights and rationality and technology and all of these wonderful things we take for granted in this country. And they went for it precisely because that's what it is.
It's pretty much. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I could go on forever.
It's pretty much common knowledge at this point. At least people feel like this attack, this actual physical attack that we all saw on television today, came from the outside. But my feeling is that there are forces from the inside that are eroding away this self-esteem you talked about in the beginning of the show. What are these forces? What things have been happening in this country that ultimately allowed the country to get to this state where this sort of thing could happen?
It's all the things that I write about all the time and all the things that people see here on the website coming home to roost. Most of us today are afraid to pass judgments. We're afraid to call evil, evil, and we're afraid to call the good, the good. Most of us don't even know what the good and what the bad is. We're just completely confused. I mean, you can see a lot of this just in the reaction from our so-called intellectual, our so-called political leaders out there. I've been watching the coverage, like a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, on and off throughout the day, and I'll be continuing to watch it, Fox News and what have you, and I can't find not only am I not hearing what I want to hear from our leaders, including the president, but I can't find a conviction or a passion. I mean, Bush said some of the right words, but outside of Newt Gingrich, believe it or not, Newt Gingrich is the only person that is speaking plainly and clearly and distinguishing right from wrong and making the very important point that we have to go after not only the terrorists and not just bring them to justice, but go after the governments throughout the world. And our government knows who they are, and many of us who aren't in the government know who they are, who know how to get these terrorists and stop pussyfooting around, no matter what it takes.
Do you think they're going to be capable of doing this? George Bush is a man who has waffled, and I voted for him. I will admit it. I voted for him.
He was the lesser of two wafflers.
He was the lesser of two wafflers. But everything he has come up with and said he has waffled around on and backed off on. Do you think this is just going to be business as usual?
Well, it's an excellent question, and time will tell, both the short run and the long run. I will tell you this, and I say this as a psychologist as well. I know that under grave stress, that people can rise to the occasion where they couldn't otherwise rise to the occasion. And I'm still, despite my criticisms of Bush, and I can probably beat up on him more than you could, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Time will tell. I'm much happier that he's there than Al Gore is there, particularly because the people Gore would have surrounded himself with. I mean, on the one hand, I've been disappointed in the reactions, even of the defense secretary, who just doesn't seem to be responding with enough conviction so far. But can you imagine if people like Madeleine Albright and these other goons that Clinton had in, can you imagine if they were there? I don't know if these people are going to disappoint me, but it would have been horrific to contemplate if we had people like that around. So, I'm trying to be positive here, but really, this is an unspeakable loss today. Things will never, ever be the same in this country. I write about it in the article for the Daily Dose of Reason for September 12th. And things are never going to be the same. That's the tragic news. That could also ultimately be the good news. I don't expect this to be even a little bit of comfort to those who have actually lost a loved one or lost property here. But the good news ultimately could be, in reality, that the country finally wakes up once and for all. We're certainly not going to see any deep-rooted philosophical revolution from one event, even an unbelievable series of events like this one. But the better parts of the better people who've been straddling the fence for all these years, and I'm not talking Republican, Democrat, I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm just talking about straddling the fence with, well, I don't know what right is, I don't know what wrong is, who am I to judge? Maybe now that our society, our very way of life has been threatened in a way that was inconceivable to any of us even 24 hours before. Maybe now they'll be more willing to make judgments of right from wrong in their daily lives, and also in dealing with our political leaders and telling them, these guys are bad. You take whatever means necessary to go after these governments that are enabling and harboring these terrorists that aren't going to stop here. That was another point Gingrich made. They're not going to stop here. And this is probably just the opening round of what they will continue to do, even worse, if we let them. It's not only a matter of standing up to them militarily, which of course is important, but it's also a matter of standing up to them morally. And that's really what I mean by self-esteem, that each of us has to feel that we are entitled to freedom. We're not entitled to having people provide things for us, but we are all entitled to live under freedom. And that has been attacked today in the most grotesque way imaginable.
But they don't say it's that. They don't. Your Al Gores of the world and your Madeleine Albrights and a lot of these other liberal intelligentsia.
Well,
they
Colin
don't say
Powell.
they're attacking your freedom.
Well, Colin Powell isn't much of an advocate either. I mean, his response today was so tepid. I mean, I don't want to be too hard on these people. They're under great stress, but it really is what I expected from them, because there's not this passion. There's this, even after all of this has happened, there's this kind of tepid, walking on eggshells. I mean, Bush said the right words, but, we're going to have to see what he puts into action.
Yeah.
But, think back to World War II. Think what ended World War II. It was bombing Japan with nuclear weapons. And that could never happen today. If this were 1945 and 1946, first of all, Harry Truman wouldn't be president. Harry Truman would be dismissed as a radical right-winger, way to the right of Newt Gingrich. He probably wouldn't even ever get nominated, and with his views on such things as that. And today everything has moved so far to the left with respect to defense that now the Republicans, the conservative Republicans, are to the left of what the liberal Democrats were then. So, and again, this is much deeper than a Democrat-Republican issue. I'm not trying to get into all that. The deeper issue here is that we are adrift in this country. We are allowing enemies to trot upon us. We had the situation with China that our secrets were essentially given over to them, and most of the country yawned. And then we had Elian Gonzalez, and I know, we exhausted that issue, but I warned people at the time, and others who think like I do warn people as well, but there aren't many of us out there, I can tell you, that this sends a message to dictators, to terrorists, to evil people, that the world is safe for dictatorship. The whole Elian Gonzalez incident and a lot of these incidents with China.
And they fawned on Fidel Castro.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So we're reaping what we sow. Mm-hmm. And the thing that still gives me hope for America is that maybe, this is what I always think, and this is what we're going to find out in coming days and weeks, months, and years, but even short term, I think we're going to start to find it out. My hope is that as screwed up as our intellectuals are, our professors at our universities, our psychologists, our politicians by and large, that the people themselves are better than their leaders. And this is a country that has really, the whole American Revolution, one thing I always read about it that stuck with me was that it was a revolution. Yes, there were battles on the battlefield that ultimately did have to take place, but it was at the core a revolution in the hearts and the minds of the people, their rational minds, and as a consequence of that, their passionate convictions. There were enough people convinced and determined at that point in time that a, relatively speaking, ragtag army could overthrow the biggest world power at the time. And if the Americans did it then, we can certainly fight terrorism today with just 10% of that backbone, or 5% of that backbone. For God's sakes, we just need some backbone here. And we haven't had any. And this is deeper than Clinton versus Bush, Republican versus Democrat. This has been a trend in our country that has been taking place for years now, and the chickens have come home to roost.
Through the wonders of modern technology, our webmaster and the people who handle your massive website are able to tell us a lot of times what pages and what things people are reading when they come onto the site. It's with any site. People can see what page people are looking at. And as many people come to your site for your political commentary and your political thoughts as do for your psychological views, for your views on psychology, there's a much more human factor here. Of course, we can talk about our country and we can talk about the self-esteem and the nonsense that's been going on that's made us yawn when all of these things have happened. But there is sorrow and pain in New York City as probably 10,000 people are dead. And all of those people, or many of those people, probably have relatives, friends, neighbors, all throughout the country. I know I've made several phone calls today into New York City trying to find people that I know.
Yeah, I know people who have too.
Talk a little bit, and by the way, listeners, there will be no commercials in this show. A great sacrifice on my part, the producer.
Hey, no tax dollars either.
No
from the
tax
federal
dollars either. So it's the whole thing is courtesy of Dr. Hurd today, because he just has things he needs you to hear. But the grief, the pain, the sorrow, how can people deal with this? And I'm talking about two kinds of grief here, and I want you to try to tie them together. I can't help but want to well up when I think of those two beautiful buildings gone. When I drive up Route 95 into New York, that's my signal that I'm in New York City when we go there to work with your book and to work with the publishers. It's gone now. But then there's people in New York City whose fathers are gone, and mothers and children. Talk about the loss, the grief, how people can handle not only the loss of those two beautiful buildings and what they symbolize, but the people.
Well, you're so right, Bob, because there's two levels of grief here. One level of grief is for those who have actually lost loved ones, friends, business associates, tens of thousands of people. I myself am just still trying to integrate this into my mind, and it's going to take time because, like most Americans, I'm not used to this. This is not an everyday event. It's a big deal to most Americans if it's 100 people, to say nothing of tens of thousands at the center of the whole economy up in New York City and all of Western civilization. But there's two levels. One level is you've lost a loved one, and if you're going through that, in a way, you don't care. All you care is you don't care about the rest of the world. You care about the loved one you've lost. It could just as easily have been cancer. It could just as easily have been a car accident on the way to the 7-Eleven or something. You've lost a loved one, and reams and reams have been written about that by psychologists, and I don't need to go into all that. You go through what you go through. But what's unique and different about this tragedy is that this is truly shared on some level by just about everybody. Those of us who didn't lose a loved one obviously don't feel the same way as those who did. It's much more, it's an abstract kind of emotion, if there's such a thing, as you think about. I still shudder to think about the hundreds of floors or dozens and dozens of floors in the World Trade Centers just collapsing like that. I feel tremendously sad that there are people that went through that, and there's people that's suffering. But it's also, even if nobody had been in the building, I would be at tears over that, because that it truly is. I think, Bob, you were saying someone commented at your office something that I had thought at one point today. Didn't she say that the New York City is back to where it was when I grew up?
Yep, she said it's the skyline of my youth now.
Right.
And I'm thinking, it's too bad maybe it wasn't the world of her youth.
Yeah.
Because it was that world when this woman was younger, 30 and 40 years ago, that made the buildings like this possible.
Right. I have a picture of the New York skyline, I think around 1940, and you've seen that, Bob, and it's a nice picture, but when I look at it, I think, yeah, but the skyline is so much more spectacular today, even though I like the quaintness of the old skyline. Well, today, within the span of 4 hours, or less than that, really, with the span of an hour, the skyline changed forever. And what that represents is a loss for us all. It's a loss of a very major chunk of our civilization. It's a loss it's an even greater loss than we've already suffered in this country of our freedoms. And it's a loss, ultimately, I think there was a Star Trek episode called The Enemy Within. I certainly heard the title somewhere. I think it was Star Trek.
That was it.
And the enemy is ultimately within us. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not in any way excusing the outside people who did this and believe absolutely even stronger than Newt Gingrich, I bet, that we need to take every means necessary to destroy them. I think Gingrich said that, by the way, not just bring them to justice. He reacted against that sentence, and I do too. The goal here is to find them and to destroy them. And if we can't find them, and we know governments in the Middle East who can, and they won't help us, then we will need to destroy them also, because they are destroying us. And this is war. And this is war, even though this is a terrorist situation. We can't throw up our hands and say, oh, well, terrorists are invisible. There's nothing we can do about it.
Oh, but I hear it already. I hear it in some people's minds that are listening. I hear the keening and the left-wing whining. Destroy. You see what a radical Dr. Hurd is? How can he be such a... Ladies and gentlemen, look at your televisions.
Exactly. Didn't you hear something today, Bob? Or you got something through the email, through this coaching association that you belong to? From for our listeners who don't know, a coach is essentially like a psychotherapist or a counselor, personal relations counselor. What did this coach send?
I was absolutely flabbergasted. I received, I belong to International Coaching Federation because I work as a life coach on the side with people, part business consultant, part life coach, whatever. And this mass email went out to all of the members of the Federation about how we must understand the pain that the perpetrators were going through. and
I
we
just
must
couldn't
pray
believe
for
it.
them. Well, I was furious. I sent back an email. Actually, I think I clicked something that probably sent it to every coach in the country. I hope I did. But I said, you sit there in your office and you're doling out understanding and you're doling out concern for their pain. I said, as you sit there, let's check with the people in New York City right now and all around the country who have relatives that are charred like a piece of wood, burned to a crisp. I wonder how much they're willing to understand and feel the pain. It's this crap that has brought us to the point that we're at. This fawning nonsense. We need to pray for them. Well, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. But you could have been praying all day long, and both of those buildings would still be crashed to the ground with thousands of people inside them. I didn't want to hear it, and it infuriated me.
Let me tell you this. If there is anybody out there guiltier than Osama bin Laden or whoever the terrorists
it's those people.
These are the people. These are the ultimate enablers. These are the ultimate sanctioners of our destruction.
And these are the ones I'm afraid are going to get to Bush, who is a wimp. These are the ones I'm afraid they've already gotten to Colin Powell. He's probably beyond hope.
I never thought that. I always thought Colin Powell was overrated anyway. From reports I read about the Persian Gulf War, written shortly after that war, by Washington Post authors. Who are the famous?
Bernstein, Woodward?
Yeah, one or both of them wrote a book that I read after the Persian Gulf War. In that book, they reported rather favorably, because I guess from their point of view, this is a good thing, that Colin Powell really had been very sort of tepid and not really want to do the Persian Gulf War, and it was more George Bush the first and Cheney and so forth. And, I've never thought much of him. And, of course, I won't even get into his running around the country a couple years ago and holding hands with Clinton and Hillary and saying everybody needs to sacrifice and volunteer and all that kind of thing. But, I don't think the country – I mean, he may deserve some credit for being a pretty good general. I mean, it may be that once it comes to having to execute something, even if his heart's not in it, he'll be better than certain people.
Well, I sure
Pete
hope
Clinton
so.
would have, but that's not saying much. But really, I want to emphasize. I understand what you're saying about Bush, and I don't disagree. But the issue here is deeper. It's deeper than Bush. It's deeper than liberal conservative. Because the kind of selflessness and self-effacement and feeling guilty and feeling less than conviction about the fact that a country of accomplishment is a great country, and it's a country that is not only worth fighting for, but just defending and feeling good about, that has been slowly frittering away decade after decade in this country. And we're paying the price because, let me tell you, whether we're talking about an abusive alcoholic or non-alcoholic, abusive type personality in a family, like an abusive father or an abusive mother, or whether we're talking about a terrorist on the scale of what we've seen today and everything in between, people like this don't act this way unless they feel or sense or see a collapse in moral conviction in their enemy, because irrational, immoral, evil people feel stronger. There's nothing strong about them, but they feel stronger the extent to which we start to feel weaker within ourselves. And let me tell you, they noticed when America yawned at the Chinese getting secrets. They noticed when America yawned, half of America yawned and the other half said, send Alien back to Castro. They noticed these things. They realize Americans, by and large, don't care about freedom much anymore. Now, I'm hoping, I don't pray, but if I prayed, I would pray as well. I'm hoping that they misunderstood, and they're going to see a different side to America come out now.
Well, we hope so.
If not, we're finished.
They say it takes hitting bottom for somebody to mend their ways, and hopefully this is the way. Well, you know what? The people who are listening to our show and who have hung in here with us, we're going to give them a surprise. Dr. Hurd interviewed a very, very outspoken young woman on a show back on KFNX, if I remember correctly.
Right.
in Phoenix, Arizona. And we are very, very fortunate to have her with us tonight. I think we woke her up. She has a very, very strange schedule because she is an airline pilot. And she's also outspoken, and she feels much the way that I think a lot of our website visitors feel. And I want to bring her on right now.
Carole, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this most insane of days.
Yeah, thank you.
You are an airline pilot for a major airline. We're not going to say which, of course.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you first the question that's on a lot of people's minds today, and it's been talked about a lot. These hijackings. I mean, I don't even have the count on how many there were. It's just unbelievable. But as these planes crashed, they were hijacked, of course, as everyone knows, and crashed into World Trade Center, Pentagon, and what have you. Some of them failed and ended up in Pennsylvania, and
right.
God knows where else. But, okay, common sense seemed to suggest that no pilot is going to allow his plane to be crashed into any building. I mean, if the plane's going down, let it be water or something. They don't
right.
want to take innocent people with them.
Right.
Or more innocent people with them. So, okay, so that common sense is right on that point.
Right.
Okay, so what would you, and I realize this is all speculation.
Yeah, how do you think it happened?
Yeah, how do you think it happened?
Wow. Well, when I talked to my mom about it this morning, as I was watching the thing, and they showed the footage where it crashed into the tower, and I thought, they killed the pilots. That was the first thing I said to her. I said, they must have overpowered the pilots. They killed the pilots first. Then they sat down there. They had to kill the pilots first.
Yeah, so someone did it who knew how to fly the plane.
I would think so, yeah. And considering the coverage that they had today, that these terrorist groups actually train people specifically to fly these types of aircraft, Boeings, and ones that, like wide bodies that carry a lot of people. I would say, yeah, they train people to specifically fly. You can't do that accidentally. It's not that easy to point one at something like that at that speed and actually hit it.
So the plane was going incredibly fast in the film. I mean, they must have been full out to get as much of the effect as they were obviously going for.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Okay, but you're saying, Carole, that the terrorist pilots were trained. They actually go into training and learn how to fly?
Well, I don't know that myself.
I mean speculating. I'm speculating,
I'm just getting that from what I saw on television today. The reports from the news, all the news stations, the various cable stations, were that these guys are actually trained to do this, to fly these airplanes.
Because they'd have to be. I mean, we can just infer this, I suppose, because we all agree that the pilots, the legitimate pilots, are not going to crash into.
No, I don't.
They're not going to die. I mean, even a gun held to their head, they're probably not going to do it because they're going to die anyway. So there must have been some training on the part of these terrorist pilots.
Definitely.
But this is probably what happened in Pennsylvania and with the United flight. Obviously, they just went down, and maybe they weren't successful in killing the pilot, and whoever drove that plane into the ground was someone who knew what these people were trying to do and decided the lesser of two evils was to crash the plane into the woods before taking it and crashing it into the United States Capitol or into the Washington Monument or to Camp David or wherever it was supposed to go.
Maybe they just lost control. That Egypt Air thing, they had guys fighting over control of the aircraft, and that destroyed it on its own. So I could see that would be another potential for that Pennsylvania crash.
Okay, now in your opinion, Carole, what does all this say about the state of airline security in this country?
Oh, I could have told you that before they crashed the first thing into the tower. I mean, the state of aircraft security in this country it's a joke.
Why?
I mean, I used to walk around. I used to work for a commuter airline, and I would walk. Oh, they had these perimeter fences up, which were tall, and they might have had a couple strands of barbed wire. But, I used to walk past there and having a suspicious mind, I would think, all somebody would have to do is walk by this fence, tip a gun in, and wander off, and then his accomplice would just, mowing the grass or one of the ramp workers or something. And this is at two major airports that I was frequenting. Pick up the gun, plant it in a prearranged spot on the aircraft, and then, somebody, maybe a third person, maybe the guy that dropped the gun in, picks up his seat on the flight, and he's got a gun. You don't have, and then on top of which, a lot of these people that are working at the airports on the ramps and inside the secure areas don't go through security screening. They've got badges that they swipe, but they're not. Their lunch boxes aren't screened. They just walk in.
So they could walk in with anything.
Anybody could steal those stupid badges. And then you've got the catering trucks, which go in and out. And again, they have to swipe a card to get the electric gate to open when they drive in and out. But they go in and out and in and out all day long. And I look at those, and it's like one of those. I mean, I picture one of those Tom Clancy movies, where they kill the truck drivers and plant their own guys in the truck, and off they go into the onto the airport. I mean, it just can't be that hard. And then you have the people who are actually doing the security checkpoint screening the bags. I mean,
yeah. So there's many places, there's so many points in the process that are weak.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. I mean, what they ought to have is, at a bare minimum, professional, like career professionals doing these screenings. The idea of having a 95% turnover per year on these $7 an hour screeners, and that you're placing the security of these airliners and these people in their hands, is kind of outrageous when you think about it.
I tell you, I would feel much better knowing that a for-profit company is in charge of these kind of things than just the government.
Well, I don't know if a lot of those are privately contracted private security companies, but the fact remains that they're not high prestige, they're not high profile type jobs, and they're also not high pay. So the kind of people that are going to take those jobs are the kind of people who would otherwise be, I don't know, and I don't want to slander somebody, but they would be doing other low tech, low ambition type jobs, and they're just not putting the incentive there for good people to come and do those jobs.
And that they are with people's lives in their hands.
Would I be right, Carole, to speculate that part of the problem here is that the airlines tend to assume that safety is the government's responsibility, even though obviously the airlines have a huge vested interest in having safety, but that a lot of it gets shunted over to the government, but then the government, well, we know how the government is. They just are only, look at the post office. It's the same thing with the FAA ultimately.
The airlines can say all they want about safety first, and they've got no interest whatsoever in having a bad safety record.
That's what worries me.
Because they'll just go right down the tubes if they do. They have an interest in maintaining an outstanding safety record, all of them. But when it's the government overseeing all this, the tendency on the part of the airlines is, geez, these pests are here again. There's a Fed around. Everybody's panics. There's a Fed on the ramp. There's a Fed on. It's like a nuisance rather than, at least at the level that I'm seeing. Now, maybe if you get to the executive level, they're grateful to have this assistance. I don't know, but I doubt it.
Yeah,
frankly.
but on the ramp where it all matters, obviously something happened on 4 or 5 ramps this morning.
At least, I don't know how those guys got on, but the things that I've seen where I've imagined how easy it would be to breach security at some of these airports that I've seen. Now, there's other ones where it would be a little bit harder to do what I describe, which is, at big airports like O'Hare. But they ought to have 2 levels of, like at a prison. Shouldn't there be a giant security fence followed by a gap followed by another security fence? There's 2 layers of, it'd be that much harder to get a weapon past something. But
Carole, I want to ask you about the psychological point of view here as well, if I can go Barbara Walters on you for a minute. I mean, you're the way I should let listeners know, the way that you and I originally had contact really was through my writings. You knew about my writings, newsletter, website. You're one of my biggest fans, I think, which I appreciate.
I would say so.
And you, from the point of view of someone who shares a lot of my ideas and the way I think and the way a lot of our listeners think, what did you feel today? Not only that, but also as a pilot, who is a pilot for a major airline. Oh. What kind of things did you think and feel today as you watch all of this?
Anytime I see an airplane crash, whether it was something like, the Delta in Dallas or the Value Jet, whether it ends up being pilot error or something that they couldn't control, I feel anger. I feel anger for those people that were on the airplane because they had to die in that situation. It upsets me no end to see that, and I think of the pilots and the crew, like in Pittsburgh, that 737, and it is so upsetting to me because I can project the terror pretty vividly, I think.
And can you imagine sitting there and looking at that building coming in?
Unfortunately, I can't imagine it.
No, I mean,
unfortunately,
I can't.
So most of my emotion today was anger and rage, and in that end of the spectrum, and a desire for revenge, frankly.
Yeah, well,
prompt revenge.
Now I want to get into this, and this is as a pilot or just as anybody. I was talking with Bob before you came on. You unfortunately didn't get to hear it, but I guess you'll listen later if you go to the site.
Yeah.
But we were talking, among other things, about what I see as the lack of passion, the lack of anger, the lack of conviction from any of our officials.
I was really disappointed by that. I mean, they couldn't even work themselves up into a froth over something like this. 10,000 people plus.
I mean, the senators earlier today, a few hours back, the senators, they had this bipartisan senator thing. And I mean, they were all just so...
Is that where they sang God Bless America?
Yes.
I didn't see that. I was spared that. But they were so washed out.
Yeah, they really were.
It's, on the surface level, you could say, well, they have gray hair and they're wrinkled. But actually, gray hair and wrinkles they could just as easily come across as dignity and experience.
Right.
And where was it? And I have to admit, I looked a little bit to Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, and I don't want to beat up on him too much because the guy he's got a lot of trouble on his hands at the moment. But still, I had somewhat admired him in recent months because I thought, well, he's one of the more outspoken people in the Bush administration, so maybe we can expect good things from him. But even with him, there was this, it was almost like someone was constraining him.
Yeah.
This sort of tepid and
tepid is a good word for it.
It wasn't as bad as Clinton's people. I mean, it could be worse, I guess. We could have Madeleine Albright in charge, and that would be like, let's all get in a plane and head straight down.
But that has been the tenor of everything since Bush started running. Compassionate conservatism.
Right.
Contradiction.
He's running around desperately looking for a Democrat to hold hands with.
Yeah,
please, Democrats, like me. Please like me.
I don't know how many times I heard them congratulate themselves today because there was going to be bipartisan support for some kind of action.
Can you believe
some kind of unspecified action.
I mean,
get
it's
over it. You're president, for God's sake.
And this is the very thing, and before you came on, Carole, that Dr. Hurd was talking about, that you don't think these terrorists don't see this?
Oh, that's what I
think they don't watch what's going on and see what's happening?
Of course they do. Of course they do. They're all standing. They were standing there cheering in the streets over it this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they see that. They see the lack of moral outrage. They see the lack of backbone. I mean, if they saw Colin Powell, they'd be vastly encouraged, I would think, by his pathetic comments this morning.
Oh, yeah. That's probably why they were dancing in the streets.
The irony is there's a deep... I'm going to use a cliche here, but there's a deep self-esteem crisis in this country, but none of the psychologists or the intellectuals or the talking heads out there have any clue as to what the self-esteem crisis is.
No.
They think the self-esteem crisis is we don't feel good enough about ourselves. That isn't really it. It's that we have no conviction.
Right.
We don't use reason. We don't assume there's an objective reality. We're scared to death of offending anybody.
Oh yeah, that was a theme.
And let me tell you,
through.
it's funny to a point. We can have politically correct with Bill Maher or whatever and kind of laugh about it, but there's a point where it's not funny anymore.
It becomes tragic after a point.
Right, ideas have consequences, or more accurately, the lack of ideas have consequences, and that's what today is a whole cashing in.
I said that today when I was looking at this. As soon as they said that one airplane had been possibly headed toward Camp David, I said, and when they linked the September 11th date to the Camp David Accord, I think it was the other thing that they...
I didn't hear that yet.
I said, well, there's a big fat chicken coming home to roost.
Yep.
Since 1976 at least, if not longer, that was when the landmark Accord, they've been coddling these terrorists and trying to appease them.
Are you talking about the Anwar Sadat thing?
Yeah.
Yes, the Camp David, right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the former Secretary of State under George Bush the first, James Baker, and he's more of a Bush guy than a Reagan guy. I never cared for him for various reasons that we don't have to go into. But he was one of the best examples today of this sort of passionless.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like...
It was like they were talking about a dip in the stock market or something.
Right. Or even less than that.
Yeah.
The
only person I saw who actually, Newt Gingrich seemed a little fired up, and then
he was good.
Yeah.
He was great compared to the others.
Could you believe how O'Reilly acted?
I didn't see that much.
Oh, you didn't see him talking to O'Reilly?
I was tuning out O'Reilly, frankly, because he kept coming in and out anyway.
He kept coming in and out,
right.
But he kept going, that's your point of view. And I'm thinking, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Well, O'Reilly's never been consistent, really. I mean,
no, not really.
He wishy-washes. But, I mean, it's not that I'm the president of Newt Gingrich's fan club, but, he's not right-wing enough for me.
Right.
But he really... he had it right. I mean, for that moment in time, it was his finest hour. And I felt so sad because I thought, this guy's going to get 10 minutes on O'Reilly, or 5 minutes or whatever, but nobody remotely like this with this viewpoint. And maybe we can find someone with better character than Gingrich, but still, no one with this viewpoint would have a chance of being elected. Maybe that'll change after this.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I was not hopeful of that this morning when I was talking to my mother. I said my prediction was that people are going to start feeling sorry for the Palestinians for some reason.
I do not doubt it. If there's not a Palestinian focus group or understand this silly ass email I got about understanding and praying for these people and feeling their pain, I give them 24 hours. You're going to see it on the front page of the Washington Post.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think they will. Yeah. Actually, on that, the only person I saw today that was really forthcoming was Lawrence Eagleburger, who said we ought to kill him.
Yeah.
Cool.
God bless him. I say this as an atheist. God bless him.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I didn't hear that. I wish I had. That definitely is the best thing to come out so far.
He said they won't understand it unless we kill some of them.
Well, that's
Right.
all they do understand, and this is what Newt Gingrich says.
It's a culture of death.
It's a culture of death. They
that
understand
is the only thing they
that.
understand. You have to answer their force with more force.
Yeah. When we went in and bombed Gaddafi, nobody heard from terrorists for years.
Right.
Because basically they're cowards. They're like little children coming and throwing toilet paper on the trees in front of your house and running away in the dark.
I actually heard somebody today on the radio say that they weren't cowards because apparently Bin Laden's PR guy was saying that it takes a lot of courage to crash an airplane into a building like that.
No, it doesn't. Not when you're not when you're into fundamentalist religion.
Yeah, suicide
Well,
is brave.
Now
they're
dancing
motivated.
around
Brave.
with Allah. That's what they
Aside
think.
from the hatred of capitalism in the United States,
It's-
their motivation is to go to heaven and live with 300 hookers because that's that's actually literally what they tell them is going to
Right.
happen.
And you named the word there, Carole, hatred.
Yeah.
It's hatred. Someone that we really, all of us here enjoy, Ayn Rand. She defined envy as hatred of the good for being
the good.
Yeah.
And I'm
And if
sorry,
that's not their motive,
if that isn't their motive, what else on earth could be?
We are running short on time, Dr. Hurd, and I wanted to just get one thing in before we finish. Those of you that are listening are obviously looking at either a little Real Player window or you are on Dr. Hurd's site, drhurd.com. And his Daily Dose of Reason today was actually posted early and written specifically for this day. And I'm going to read one paragraph from it, and then you can take the show out. You and Carole can talk for a second and take the show out. But I want to say this because I want people to scroll down and read this article because it's incredible. The best of the American spirit was reborn on this day. Something good, which still existed inside the people, something lacking in most of its leaders, but still alive though dormant in most of the people, woke up. It took losing something great to realize that it was great.
And I should emphasize that the context of the article is what I hope, and again, if I prayed, I'd pray as well, that this is what historians write about September 11th, 2001, decades from now.
as a turning point.
Exactly. Because if not, we're not going to be here, and we don't deserve to be.
Correct.
Yeah, Carole, we so appreciate you letting us. Who knows what your schedule is like? I understand what it's like working for the airlines. I hope we didn't wake you out of a deep sleep.
Oh, no, not at all. On the
Right.
contrary.
It's so appreciated that you came on the show.
Well,
Dr.
Thank
Hurd was
you.
so pleased
Thank
to
you
get
for your
you.
time, Carole, and fly safely, okay?
Thank you very much.
All
You
right.
have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today for Solutions Not Excuses with Dr. Michael Hurd. To get your free issue or to subscribe to the Living Resources newsletter, visit Dr. Hurd's website at www.drhurd.com. That's drhurd.com or call 1-800-35...